Hello. Welcome back to Music 103, the introduction to film and sound. Today, we will resume our discussion about the very first long feature film with sound, which got great success during the 1920s. Yeah, it's called Jazz Singer. Let me refresh your memory. And you might remember the sound film was in a kind of precarious situation because people was not so convinced about the value and the future of sound film. Some people were still happy with silent film, and some people didn't have budget to make a transition from silent film to a sound film. So a strong hit, a big mega hit was necessary to convince people's mind about the sound film and the market value of that new technology. So Jazz Singer just achieved this goal in a very beautiful way, but about the subject matter, it was a kind of ugly film, not because it was about jazz singer, but because it contains a dark history of American pop culture. Blackface entertainment. So, uh, uh, blackface entertainment or minstrel show, in other words, was super popular even from the early 19th century. So it's century-old tradition, notorious tradition for American entertainment culture. And more unfortunate thing is, after the big success of the Jazz Singer, there was a short heyday of blackface musical films. I'm not joking. And by the way, the main actor of Jazz Singer, later also became the superstar in blackface musical films. And his name is R. Jorson. And now you will watch a short video that contains one of his blackface performances in public. Let's watch.
Oh, I come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee. As I grind to Louisiana, my true love for to see. Oh, it rained so hard the day I left. The weather, it was dry. The sun so hot I froze to death. Susanna, don't you cry. Oh, Susanna, don't you cry for me.
Okay, enough. And you might realize there's no African American musician or actor on that video. Everyone's, I believe, they are white performers with blackface. Yeah, that's the actually essence of blackface entertainment. And indeed, look at the costume of this guy, big, exaggerated, ridiculously big gloves, ridiculously big makeup, etc. Heavy makeup, sorry, and ridiculously big, you know, bow tie like Meitante Conan, Japanese manga. Yeah, that's irrelevant quote. But anyway, so uh, the thing is, it's a basically a mockery to the African American people in South. In other words, cotton pickers. Sorry. Yeah, but that was another notorious nickname for those community, right? So anyway, this show is basically a mockery and even humiliation to real African American musicians and actors. But anyway, this tradition continues, and even Jazz Singer made a second heyday of blackface entertainment. Okay, then let's talk about the plot. Well, I wish we could watch the entire film for educational purpose, but we have limited time. So I will just go quick about the plot summary. And I have to say, I brought this quote directly from IMDb for the sake of, precision. But even after reading the IMDb, description, you may be wondering, so what the heck is this movie? Okay, so the main character is the son of a Jewish cantor. Okay, then he has to defy the tradition of his religious father because in order to pursue his dream of becoming a jazz singer with blackened face. Yes. And then you might remember I mentioned the actor actually had very similar autobiographical story. So the main actor, R. Jorson, was actually the son of Jewish cantor, and he came from the East European. Yeah, so he is immigrant. In other words, one of the many immigrant white poor communities. R. Jorson actually chose a very similar profession, blackened-faced entertainer. So you see, the story gets really complicated inside of the film and outside of the film because now we see a success story of actual Eastern European immigrant, Jewish immigrant. On the other hand, that immigrant appropriating African American culture. So very complicated. Nonetheless, I don't want to defend or I don't want to blur or I don't want to make ambiguous statement about what's wrong here. I mean, you can see what is problem here. So I don't think we can defend this guy, what this guy has done. But nonetheless, the entertaining, business of United States during the 1920s, it was so dark and complicated. And if I expand the story to female actors, then the story gets more complex. So let me stop here. Anyway, later, R. Jorson became the king of blackface performance. Yeah, that's a famous nickname for him. And it's a kind of amazing success for him because he was born in Lithuania, Jewish town. And if you're interested in Jewish history in Eastern Europe, then you will know the Jewish communities in Eastern Europe had really hard life. So coming to America and getting the second chance. And R. Jorson was one of such lucky guys or amazing guys. Although the blackface entertainment itself is no. Okay, then what happened the next jazz singer for this guy? Yeah, he just replicated the same thing over and over. He didn't develop any new specialty or venue. So he was just forgotten quickly after the success of the jazz singer. Interesting thing is his very last performance happened in the middle of Korean War. Yeah, he actually came to South Korea to cheer up the American soldiers there. Another interesting history. Anyway, so we could continue our discussion about race, appropriation, other notorious remnants of, slave culture, etc. But I mean, this is not a critical race theory, a critical race class, or something like that. So let me just summarize the impact of jazz singer on the history of sound film, early sound film. So I might summarize the big success of this film in four different terms. First, this film convinced people about the economic merits of sound system. Big money, so big success, so it's worth investing. So many theater owners now were convinced, okay, now I feel like I have to invest some money, big money on the sound system because that is the future of the cinema. Secondly, Jazz Singer proved sound film has whole new artistic and entertainment potentials of sound feature films. Yeah, imagine 88 minutes of entertainment. Still, that's a kind of standard running time for family film, right? Most Pixar animations, they are shorter than 2 hours, right? So 88 minutes of show, drama, struggles, etc. That sounds really familiar to us. So all these tradition actually settled down with the arrival of sound film, and jazz singer opened up that new age. So then, thirdly, jazz singer proved culture position of sound film as something cool, something hip, and something promising. Yeah, so the main actor actually became a big movie star, although he was forgotten quite quickly. And finally, jazz singer proved there could be a good balance between old style of movie and new style of movie. In other words, old and new ways of storytelling. So, for example, family crisis, family drama, that's not new at all. From the 19th century, family drama was quite common in novels, in plays, in other shows, etc. Or, the crisis between two lovers, etc. And that's old way of making story. And in the silent film, that kind of story was already common. On the other hand, now since movie gets accompanied by the actual sound, synchronized sound, now the movie can include spectacles, singing, dancing, etc., vocal performances, and so on. So old and new are combined in a fantastic way in Jazz Singer, although the subject matter is awful. For that reason, some people make a nickname about 1960s, the Roaring 60s. And then what happened in the film music in the 1960s? Well, not as dramatic as American political history, but still there were hot issues, very, very, very provocative issues, which had been developed from 1950s, post-war years, in other words. So I don't think we can go through the everything about the history of film music in the 1960s. Even I cannot count all the things, all the important issues by myself happened in 1960s, but there are four very important things, very important subjects. So we will go through these subjects. All right, let's start it. Let's get started. So topic number one of the 1960s, crass commercialism. So we need to date back the year of 1958. And we already know what happened in the 1958, the new agreement between a new musicians guild and film studios. So, as I said, flexibility was one of the biggest changes in the film music industries. Then, let's imagine uh, you might remember last week, I mentioned some critics were not happy with film music industries of the time. Those critics thought film music is just manufactured, just like a Coca-Cola. Every jobs are just divided, and one person just does one same job. Orchestrator does orchestration, composer just does spotting music, and editor just does editing jobs, etc. It's not so creative. Just learn, emulate the European masters, masters like Miklos Losha. You might remember, his examples, right? The Spellbound Concerto. So this problem is actually the extension of, so the crass commercialism is the extension of this controversy. So back then, I mean, in the early 1960s, film composers, they were still used to the system of the old, golden age style. They are composers. They are not songwriters. They are not scorers. They are not a video jockey. They deemed themselves as the artist. Yeah, I mean, they could be proud of themselves, of course, but since the 1958, now studios could hire flexible artists, flexible variety of artists, And likewise, the studios began demanding a variety in musical styles. Back then, I mean, before the 1958, the Musicians Guild just forced to hire very, very specific, number of people and artists, you know. So the musical style was also influenced by that fixed choices. So every film, many films just sounded very similar because those films had to be accompanied by similar number and similar artists, you know, monopolized by the Musicians Guild. But now flexibility rules. So now studios got more voice about the variety of musical styles. So they just demanded, hey, why don't we just include some jazz, or why don't we include some pop music or rock music, etc. But many conservative, composers, film composers, they were really shocked by such request. Hey, we are film composers. We are not a pop song producer. I mean, if you're looking for the songwriter, then you can hire the songwriter, not me. Uh, so this is the background why the 1960s was heated by the controversy of, commercialism. More and more and more and more commercial music into the film score, and conservative film composers were really, you know, shocked, and they disliked that kind of change. But uh, whether you like it or not, changes that always happen, and you sometimes need to adapt yourself. That is also true for today's industries, right? And we have Jerry Goldsmith, one of the legendary figures in Hollywood film music, and he said the whole style of filmmaking has changed in the 1960s, but many of the older guys haven't bridged the gap creatively or technically. What does that mean? Goldsmith just criticizes his colleagues. They were confused about the changes, and they simply objected or refused or repelled the kind of wave of changes. But still, whether film music artists hate it or like it, changes were happening, and one of those fundamental changes was the inauguration of New American Cinema in the 1960s. So look at the name, New American Cinema. That means those people involved in the inauguration, they were very determined. We will make a new film. We will make a new style of film. 1960s is the new beginning, etc. So people like Jerry Goldsmith just knew, okay, now it's time to change ourselves, or time to adapt ourselves. But many others just refused. And one of them was Elmer Bernstein. Uh, he, in one interview, he said, the commercial attitude has remained. To hell with the score. Let's get the title song on the chart. What does this mean? Film score, a kind of artistic craft of traditional film music composure, now ignored by studios, and studios now want more pop songs in the film so that they can more money. They can get additional profits. And also one of the another conservative composer in film music was David Raskin, and he said the choice to use pop is often made for reasons that have little to do with the film itself. And somehow his complaint was reasonable, because many bad films just to show using pop song out of nowhere, and those pop songs are very annoying and not so effective for the drama or for the narrative or for other aesthetic things. So David Raskin's complaint was reasonable, but basically we can see he's also kind of fundamentally not welcoming the pop songs, simply because he did not do the pop song score in his career? Well, in today's standard, from the today's perspective, the complaint of Bernstein or Raskin seem to be kind of clueless because nowadays we have great film composers who were actually a rock musician. I think one of the legendary cases is Trent Reznor. He was the member of Nine Inch Nails, the rock band, but now he's more known as the film composer. I mean, still Nine Inch Nails is really, really good, famous rock band, and Trent Reznor is very capable musician who can do so many things at the same time. But uh, his reputation as film composer is as big as his reputation as a rock singer, singer-songwriter. One of the really successful scores by Lesnar is Social Network. What some of you might watch that film, it's a story of Mark Zuckerberg, like a you know documentary plus fiction kind of style. And what kind of music would be appropriate for the birth of Facebook? And Trent Reznor just solved this problem just brilliantly. So he got reputation. But let's go back to 1960s. We didn't have Trent Reznor, or we didn't have someone like him yet. I mean, there was some artists, a few artists who tried to stretch their career from pop music to film scoring, but still, film music industry was still dominated by conservative, traditionally trained film composers. That was the situation. Then we might be fell into the controversy itself. So pop music in film, is that bad? Is that not good? Is that undermining the traditional film music? Blah blah blah. But here is a very interesting thing. Some people actually just question the controversy itself. These people ask, you know, hey, I think even from the beginning of the history, even the beginning of film music in history, pop music was always there. Pop music was always utilized. So why should we fight about such pointless debate? Pop music was already a partner of film music industry from the beginning, from the very beginning, like silent film. So musicologist, I mean music historian like Julie Herbert. Now you see her picture on the slide. People like her says, well, I see even from the beginning of history, we always used pop music. So why should we hate pop music in film? Why not? So Julie Herbert shows a counter example. Elvis Presley and Alan Freed during the 1950s. Look at the year 1950s. So even before the 1960s, film industries were already drawing pop music fans into their film industries. Imagine, a Hollywood film producer making a blockbuster film starring BTS. That kind of situation happened in 1950s. And Alan Freed was a kind of, white teenagers BTS in the 1950s, if I use the metaphor. Now you see the picture of the group of teenagers on the street. This is actually the Manhattan in one day of 1950s. These teenagers just heard Alan Freed is giving a concert in a Manhattan, and these young men just thought, "Gosh, I have to go there." Even my parents would not allow me to go there, but whatever, I will go. So the shocking thing to parents was these teenagers, they just gathered without parents' permission. Even policies were like, hey, why all these people are here? I mean, they are all high schoolers. Why you guys are here? We will watch the Alan Freed concert, something like that. And years ago, when I heard the news about BTS, when BTS had concert in the Manhattan, the place was so crowded with teenagers and fans, blah blah blah. I just automatically, remind myself, wow, history repeats. I mean, I'm not saying Alan Freed was like predecessor of BTS. I cannot say that, but history just repeats. Teenagers filling Manhattan, crowding Manhattan for just a pop star. That already happened like in 1950s. Of course, we have a difference, right? BTS is like a foreign boy band, from South Korea. So I mean, it's a kind of sensational, a foreign pop star just to make people gather in one place, like thousands, millions of people in one place. That's amazing. But what I'm saying is the power of pop star itself. 1950s already proved it, already witnessed the power of a one single pop star for teenage consumers, teenage audiences. So it's not surprising the film industry just thought, wow, that's amazing. How many tickets can we also, sell to those people? Okay, let's make a movie out of Alan Freed. So they did. So we have very a shabby film starring Alan Freed. Actually, musically, it's very decent film. I mean, in terms of music, because this film is a kind of a Avengers of 1950s pop stars, from white artists to African American artists, just all in one place. And its title is very, very, very straightforward: rock, rock, rock. Because in 1950s, rock was the you know, most the coolest thing for teenagers. So we will just watch the early part of this film. This is available on YouTube, so you can watch the entire thing if you want.